This is A Geek Leader. Welcome to episode 151 of A Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and today's show is brought to you by Private Internet Access. And if you don't use private internet access, then you're probably not browsing the web securely. I've been using private internet access for over 3 years now, and I use it whenever I travel so that I don't have to be dependent upon the security of the hotel that I'm staying at or anywhere like that. And I know traveling may be hard right now with COVID-19, but if you're at home and you want to be able to surf securely, at different locations, wherever you're at, or to make it appear as if you're coming out of California or New York or Chicago, get some local feeds from those areas, you can do that using private internet access. And you can get private internet access for only $3 a month. That's right, $3.33 a month if you go to ageekleader.com/VPN and sign up today. So today on the show, we've got Wayne Titus III. And before we talk about getting into the interview, I had him on, and we're going to talk about financial security and his new book about financial, but then COVID-19 hit. So I recorded this about a month before COVID-19, the lockdown in the U.S. So bear in mind, that's the context of this conversation that are coming forward. However, all these financial points that he makes that we talk about in this book are extremely important right now, especially since the economy has kind of been tanked its way down and people are losing their jobs. So please pay close attention to this interview. I think it's really important right now. And again, stay safe, and I hope you guys enjoy this. All right, Geek Leaders, today on the show, I've got Wayne Titus III. He is an entrepreneur that has started a business to help other entrepreneurs and anybody really to prepare their financial well-being. And he wrote a book that was sent to me, and I read it. And when I looked through it at first, I thought, well, why is this coming to me? And then when I read it, I was like, oh, now it makes sense. This is super important. And being the founder of AMDG Financial was kind of one of the things that was interesting to me too, because he started a business and he's grown that business and then decided to take that into a book. And with all that being said, we're going to get all into this in just a little bit. So let me welcome to the show, Wayne Titus.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
So before we get into your book and how to help people with their finances and all that good stuff, because that's one of the things that us geeks and technology people sometimes don't really think about, because we're all into the code, we're all into the technology, we're all into the gadgets and gizmos and apps and whatever else we can do. We forget about some of the money and stuff behind there. But before we get into any of that, tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are, where your career has led you from the early days to now, and why this topic of financial well-being is important to you.
Sure. Well, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My grandfather was an entrepreneur and my dad was an entrepreneur, kind of in different businesses. But I was basically inspired to become a CPA after seeing my dad receive some poor business advice from his accountant. I started my own business about 10 years after that, after seeing large companies fail. And many families were impacted by the layoffs during that tech bubble burst of 2000, 2001. Mm-hmm. I also wanted that independence and that flexibility that many entrepreneurs want. And most important, the chance to make a significant impact on people's lives and to find the time in my own life to help contribute to society.
Now, a lot of people in tech are entrepreneurs without even knowing it. Sometimes they think they're just contract employees, but in reality, I think that, in my opinion, I consider that to be an entrepreneur. How does that relate to your target audience?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Many people in the tech industry are entrepreneurs. They're contractors for themselves, or they're working with others to deliver products, and that's the key audience that we're trying to establish a connection with, and trying to educate them on, how do you improve that financial well-being, right? That's why I wrote the Entrepreneur's Guide to Financial Well-Being. It's important to understand the things you don't know, because primarily you don't know what you don't know. And early on you said something that's kind of key. You have so much fun in the tech world and what you're doing in tech that sometimes you're kind of heads down working on that and focused on that aspect of kind of not your comfort zone, but what you're really good at. And what my book tries to do is it tries to educate you a little bit on the stuff that you might not be as familiar with, in a way that's not intimidating and can be, easily understood.
Yeah, that's one of the things I liked about your book, is that it wasn't, I didn't have to be a CPA to understand it.
Right.
And I'm guessing that's pretty much the point, because if y'all wrote it as CPAs, they probably didn't need that knowledge.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't start my life as a CPA. And the one thing that I did, kind of learn over time is that many CPAs, they're kind of like master builders, right? They build these, they understand a particular way of doing things, and they're very creative in that compliance technical way. Mm-hmm. But many times they're not the interpretive advisors that you really need to help out. They're focused on compliance. They're not focused on, how do I mitigate the impact of taxes? What do I need to do with my investments? And am I going to be okay financially in retirement? And that's what we do, is we integrate the tax, financial, and investment strategy in a way that's interpretive. It's not telling you what to do, which is, kind of that person, just like your father or your mother when you're growing up, the paternalistic kind, do what I say, not what I do, what I do. They're not the informative type where they, go out, gather all this information, dump it on your desk and say, here, pick a strategy. They're the interpretive type that go out, they do the research, and then they help you understand it, what the pros and the cons are, and make a recommendation and say why. This is why I think this is good for you. They help you come to that conclusion for that decision.
So how would you define financial well-being? Because, it means different things to different people.
Yeah, it does. Well, it's interesting because, I think financial well-being is relative, right? Mm-hmm. So that's your point about it's different for each person. But what I found in my work is that financial stress is probably the worst. Number one, if you're married, where you have a relationship with somebody else, it's typically one of the primary areas of stress and strain in a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so having a good understanding of how you're going to get from point A to point B minimizes or mitigates that stress. That financial well-being isn't just about, am I going to have enough money in retirement? It's about, how am I going to get to that point where I have enough money in retirement? Most people look at like an investment advisor, like I have an investment advisory firm, and they think return in the market is the most important thing. And return in the market is important, but it's not how much you make in the market, it's how much you keep after taxes. We've got a really complex tax system in this country, and understanding the ins and outs of that is difficult. And to have an interpretive advisor that helps you kind of see how you can position yourself to mitigate the impact of tax allows you to keep more of that return that you might receive in the market in your pocket for your financial well-being in the future. So I think all of those things tie together. It's a matter of how do you do that and who do you work with to get it done?
Yeah. So can we take some hypothetical numbers and just talk about like taxes when it comes to because I totally get what you're saying. Because when you think about it, you always think, well, if I put 6% of my money away into a 401k and the company matches 4%, then there's 10% of my salary going away somewhere. But what you're saying is, how can you actually increase that number that you take home every, outside of your taxes every year, and invest that or use that to increase your, not just your, retirement in the end, but also how much money you have to play with now. Right.
So let's back up just for a second, because I think the 10% number is a good number to use in many ways. But it's important to understand that you can save taxes this year, okay? Mm-hmm. And you can do that by putting more money into your retirement plans this year. So if you put 10% there, there's 10% that's not going to get taxed by the federal government and the state government. But if you're in a lower tax bracket and you put that money away now and you pull it out later when you're retired and you're in a higher tax bracket, you've lost the efficiency of tax savings. So you save taxes at a lower rate today and you're going to pay taxes at a higher rate later. So when I was talking about it's also important to understand it's not what you earn in the markets and what you keep after taxes. That's also important to understand. It's not what you save in taxes today. It's what you save in taxes over your lifetime. You want to really minimize the cost of tax across your lifetime. And the only way to do that is to plan ahead. You can plan for what you're going to pay at the end of this year, and you can do that by putting money in your retirement accounts now. Or what you can do is you can look at it and say, I still need to put money away from retirement, but maybe I'm better off putting it in the Roth side of my 401k or investing in a Roth IRA versus a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA.
Yeah. And so let me interrupt you real quick. So for dummies like me that didn't know what a Roth was until I read your book, those are when you pay taxes up front. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because you might be, let's just say you're in the 22% bracket now. 22% is actually, nobody likes to pay tax. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to have to pay tax, if you could pay it in at 22%, that's probably not a bad deal. In 2026, the federal tax law is due to change. The current tax law is going to be repealed and it's going to sunset. And that 22% bracket is going to go up to 25%. And the 24% bracket is going to go back up to 28%. So maybe you're better off pulling that income forward, paying the tax now and putting it into a Roth. So you're paying the tax up front versus paying the tax when you take the money out later.
So it's kind of like, and the way I heard it described, and what was more like you're paying the tax on the seed, not the plant that grows from that seed. Is that a fair way of stating it?
Yeah, I'd even put it in the way of, when you're coding, there's a real efficient way of coding, and then there's a real inefficient way of coding where you're just adding lines and lines and lines of code instead of pulling them out. Right. What we're trying to do is put together a tax efficient strategy. So some people would refer to it as tax rate arbitrage. You're trying to pay less tax overall over the long period by possibly paying it at a lower rate today instead of a higher rate later.
No, I like that. I like that term because that kind of resonates with you about, sometimes you got to think about, you're right, you have to plan in order to do this. It's not something you can just like figure out on the way. You kind of have to have someone that helps you or to understand the intricacies and plan out, like, what is life going to be like 10 years from now?
Right.
Or 20 years from now.
That's exactly right. And so you can plan today on how much tax you want to pay at the end of the year, but that's a real narrow view of the impact of taxation, right? Mm-hmm. It's the taxes you pay over your lifetime that basically really impact your ability to retire more comfortably, where you can actually possibly keep more of that instead of turning that over to the government. Another aspect of that is, taxation's part of it. And what we just talked about was tax effectiveness. How effective am I going to be in paying tax? Then there's a concept called tax efficiency. How can I minimize or mitigate the impact of taxes by using an appropriate investment strategy? So making sure you're investing in the right kinds of asset classes in your IRA or in your 401k versus different kinds of asset classes on the Roth side of things.
Okay.
That's a little deeper subject, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to minimize the impact of taxes given growth in investments. So if you have an asset that's going to grow a lot and you put it in a Roth, you're never going to be taxed on that growth ever again. But if you put it in the IRA side or if you put it in the regular 401k side and it grows a lot, that just means you're going to have to pay more tax on what grew.
So it kind of sounds almost like pre-taxed dollars is almost like a trick to make you pay more taxes.
Well, that's the interesting thing. If all you did was decide I'm going to put money in pre-tax versus post-tax money, right? Mm-hmm. So putting it in the 401k versus the Roth 401k. If you invested in exactly the same thing and they returned exactly the same dollar amount and the tax rate was exactly the same as it was today when you retired, mm-hmm. you would have exactly the same amount of money. Mathematically, that's how the formula works out. There isn't one benefit over the other. So the only way that you can get a benefit is by the assets that you invest in and which account they're invested in and how much you trigger and want to pay in tax now versus later. So if you have the opportunity to pay less tax now versus more tax later, and you can and you can make that part of your strategy, that's when this strategy is going to work out the best for you.
Okay. Are there any limits to how much you can put into different accounts?
Yeah. So IRAs are limited, and Roth IRAs basically have the same limits for them. And 401ks and 401k Roths are also the same limits between themselves, but they're different than IRAs. IRAs are lower limits, and 401ks, if you work at a company that has a 401k plan, they have higher limits. Mm-hmm. And those are the best tools if you have the opportunity to participate in a 401k plan, or if you're self-employed, you can implement a 401k plan for yourself instead of an IRA, and you can have higher amounts that you can save into 401k plans.
Okay, so how would one go about implementing a 401k plan for themselves? Like, is there is that a process you have to do with the government, or is it something you can do on your own, or how does that work?
You have to work with a custodian that has a 401k model plan, and you fill out an application, and you can contribute. Once you have that application completed, you can contribute to that 401k, but it's subject to rules. So if you have other employees, you can't just make a contribution for yourself. You have to make sure that your employees also have that. So I'd say you want to be sure you're working with an advisor that understands all the ins and outs of investing in a 401k, especially if you've got employees, because there's some special rules that go along with that.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so going back to the contributing, so would it be better to kind of max out the amount that you can put into the Roth first and then roll it over to the 401k, or?
Yeah. So if you're contributing to a 401k, you can contribute either on the traditional side, which is pre-tax, or sometimes companies will have a Roth 401k feature in their 401k plan, and that's contributing after tax dollars. And those limits are quite high. And I would say if you have the opportunity and you're in a lower tax rate, you want to be contributing to the Roth. And if you're in a higher tax rate, you want to be maybe contributing to the pre-tax side of the 401k.
Right. So if you suspect that when you're ready to retire, you'll be in a lower tax bracket, then you should do the pre-tax, but otherwise you should do the post-tax.
That's exactly right. And most people, I think, would say, how much lower can tax rates get than they are today? As a professional, and with an understanding that our deficit is now going through the roof, I doubt that taxes are going to be as low as they are today for a greater period of time than 2026, when the law will revert back and the rates will go up.
I concur with that as well. And I'm not a financial person by any stretch of the imagination, but just paying attention a little bit to the little bit of news that I watch, which isn't very much. I see that, I don't think things are sustainable at this moment without increasing some taxes somewhere.
Yeah, taxes are going to go up likely, and capital gains taxes may go up as well. All of those things, and understanding how those work with your investments. If you're investing in, like if you have an individual account and you're buying and selling stocks, when you buy and sell stocks or mutual funds, you pay capital gains tax, and capital gains taxes are low as well. Right now they're 0%, 15%, or they're 20% typically. Those are the kind of the easy numbers to remember. You can pay up to 23.8% in capital gains tax, but the highest individual rate right now is 32%.
So when it comes to capital gains, I know a lot of times, especially us workers in tech, we'll get a job maybe at a startup, and part of our compensation will be in stock. And sometimes we have to keep that stock for at least a year to avoid short-term gains. Is that an advisable thing to do, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, actually, I work with a number of folks in the tech industry, and it's exactly that. You might have incentive stock options. You might have just incentive stock. You definitely want to make sure you're keeping it longer term. So basically, a year and a day will get you a long-term capital gain treatment. Mm-hmm. And you're going to pay a lower rate if you actually sell that.
Now, what if we...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what if we get the stock, but the company doesn't do well, so the stock doesn't go up? Is there still a gain to that, or is it just income at that point?
No. If you got the stock, and let's say the stock stayed the same or it went down, you may have the opportunity to take a loss. Mm-hmm. Where you cash out that stock, you get your money out of it, and then you get a loss. You can do that on the short term. without, so you can do it within a year if you wanted to do it. It's not going to necessarily harm you from that perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Cause, I was talking to a friend of mine and they were confused a little bit about the, if it's short-term less than a year, but I was like, well, short-term loss is still a loss. It's not, you don't pay taxes on a loss.
Yeah. But if you got it as a stock grant, it's more money than you had when you started. Right.
Exactly.
Unless it went to zero.
Yeah, exactly.
The bigger issue that I see is when people in tech accumulate options and they sit and they hold the options for long periods of time, and then the options go to expire. Then they're forced to actually trigger the options, and then they have all this income that comes in at a time when maybe they don't want to have all that income and they're paying higher tax rates. Mm-hmm. So it's also important to understand strategically when those options expire, when you might want to trigger them. And again, it's kind of managing how much income you're going to pay tax on. So just like we said before, from a financial perspective with investments and with taxes, we want to minimize or mitigate the impact of taxes over that period of time. So scheduling out when those options expire and how much tax impact that's going to cause is an important aspect of things.
So if we are going to sell off for some reason or another, maybe we're moving to a different company and we don't feel good about the company that we were with and we want to get rid of those stocks or something to that effect. You advise maybe just not doing it all at once, but taking a look at your income and your tax and seeing if there's certain time periods that would be better to sell and than just getting, ditching them all at once.
Yeah, you want to, some people think I got to get out of this stock and then they just sell everything off and it might push them up, 1, 2, or even 3 tax brackets. Mm-hmm. You have the opportunity potentially of splitting that capital gain over 2 years and staying in a lower tax bracket. It's always good to kind of plan that out versus a knee-jerk reaction and saying, okay, I just need to get out of this. I'm not saying that there aren't cases where it's important to get out of something quickly, but I'm saying there's tax implications to understand, and it's not always important just to get out of something quickly.
So let's get back to the entrepreneurship side just a little bit. What are some of the disadvantages that an entrepreneur may have, or some things that make it a little bit more challenging sometimes when it comes to retirement planning or financial well-being? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start their business, they're not at all thinking about anything other than getting the product out the door, having good customer service, making sure that the business is running, and the whole finances side is kind of like thrown on the back burner. Is that what you see a lot of?
Yeah, I see that a ton. And again, it's because kind of their area of focus and interest is on the business itself or the product that they're developing, right? That's where they have their fun. That's where their passion is. I don't talk to too many entrepreneurs whose passion is, how do I mitigate the impact of taxes over 20 to 40 years, right? I mean, that's what we do. Yeah. That's my passion, right?
They think that all the time. They're competitors.
Exactly. So, you don't know what you don't know. And that's where, our goal is to try to help educate entrepreneurs and help them understand what small tweaks might they make. One of them being, the type of advisor that they're working with. Are they working with an advisor that can help them see around the corners where they can't see, to see their blind spots, to help them understand and educate them as to the importance of these areas? That's the most important thing.
So how would you advise someone that maybe they are an entrepreneur and they're in their business for 3 to 5 years and they haven't really done anything for retirement since they left the corporate world and jumped in there, and they just keep getting these statements once a quarter from their former employer's 401k plan? They don't even know what to do with it. What should they be starting to do now that they've kind of got their business settled and they're doing things well, they're moving forward? What would be their first step? Would it be to call you?
I'd say it's to find an advisor that will work with them in a holistic way and help them understand what the next steps should be. Mm-hmm. Having different 401k plans around from different employers, it's good to have the retirement funds out there, but what do you do with them next? Working with an advisor that's an interpretive advisor, somebody that's got a process to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks. I think those are the most important things, are to look for those key those key things in an advisor that's going to help you. throughout that process. If you've got time to focus on your business and you can lift your head just for a minute to look at finances, I think the most important thing is to make sure you're working with the right advisor, that they're not just an advisor that's working with you on a compliance perspective. Mm-hmm. You want somebody that can work with you to integrate tax, financial, investment strategy and do it in a way that things aren't going to fall through the cracks, where they have a good business process, that they're focused on these other areas.
So I wanted to get your advice on another thing, because when it comes to, I had a friend we were talking to not too long ago, and they were talking about they met with an advisor, and the advisor was trying to sell them on insurance. How is insurance an investment product?
Actually, I don't think insurance is an investment product. It's, insurance is for protection.
Right.
And if you're using insurance as an investment product, it's really ineffective, inefficient. It's highly costly. And so I'd say there are certain cases where insurance is a good thing to have, like for, covering your family as it relates to risk. And then there's certain kinds of insurance that we talk to our clients about, term insurance versus whole life insurance. Mm-hmm. Having to save and have that investment product grow tax-free, that's an expensive way to do things. And I think there's a more efficient, effective way of using insurance for protection and using diversified underlying investments for your long-term well-being.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought it sounded weird to make insurance an investment because, I have life insurance. It's more for, you're right, protecting your family if something terrible happens.
Yeah, I started my business as a fee-only business back in 2002. So we don't sell any financial products. We don't sell insurance. But we help our clients understand what's the impact of those underlying costs for financial products, because that is the kind of when you think about taxes, nobody wants to pay taxes. But if you really truly understood the cost of underlying investments, that's another drain on, the ability for that asset to support you, later on in life. You want to be really efficient and effective with your expense ratios, with your underlying, insurance products. You want to get enough coverage, but you don't want to pay a lot for it.
Right. It's almost like a tax on the insurance.
Yeah, exactly. It's a drain. It's like running with ankle weights, right? You think that's good for you, right? Because you can build up your endurance, but that's terrible for you from a financial perspective. If you've got these ankle weights of expense ratios, or taxes, they're dragging down your performance over time.
Yeah. So let's say I only have the insurance that I need, just term life insurance that covers it for the lowest cost possible with very little fees. I'm putting a lot of money into my Roth IRA at this point because my income's kind of high, and a little bit into the 401k. Should I start investing separate money somewhere else? Is there something else? Is real estate a good investment? What is the next thing to do if I think I'm doing everything right? I've got probably, let's say 15% of my income moved around somewhere through options that I have at the job. What's next?
Yeah, there's some people think they need to branch out into real estate. I'm not so convinced that that's the best thing for everyone.
Yeah.
If you're working with a company that has the opportunity for you to make after-tax contributions to your 401k, mm-hmm. So you can, if you're 50 or less, you make a maximum contribution of $19,000. If you're older than that, you can put another $6,000 in. So you can put $25,000 into your 401k plan. If you have the ability to make after-tax contributions, you can make what's called a mega backdoor Roth contribution up to, I think it's $59,000. So the difference between $25,000 and $59,000, additional contributions, which then can be rolled into your Roth account. To me personally, from a tax planning perspective, that is a huge area that most people are ignoring, and they think real estate's a better investment. I think if you can get more money into your Roth, that's more money that you will have that's going to grow tax-free and support your lifestyle and your well-being throughout the rest of your life and through retirement. I think that's where most people need to focus on.
So if I've ignored the Roth IRA for my whole life and now I realize, oh man, I should be putting stuff in there, and I've got some cash left over, in my bank account or my savings account, just kind of sitting there, that would be a good place for it to go. Right.
But you can't put it in there directly from your savings account. So what we typically do is we say, boost the contribution from your paycheck, and then live off your bank account while you're doing that. Gotcha. So in other words, it's kind of like 6 of one and a half a dozen of the other, right? Mm-hmm. It's pulling from one side and pushing it in through your paycheck, because contributions to that have to be put in from your paycheck.
Yeah. So one piece of advice that I always give my employees and people that I work with that ever ask me is, every time you get a raise, you get that, just go ahead and increase your contributions. That way you don't miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. Pay yourself first.
Exactly. It's kind of that easy way of, bumping up your contributions without even missing it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you, like I said, if you can get that into some side of the 401k, either after tax that can be rolled into the 401k Roth, or just get it into the after tax bucket. You don't want to leave it there if you can roll it to your Roth bucket. Mm-hmm. But that's the best place to have it. And then that's where you need to invest all your aggressive asset classes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, is to put it there, because you've already paid taxes on it. When you get it back, it's just tax free.
Right. Yep. Never pay tax on it ever again.
Awesome. Is there any chance for the law to change to where we would have to pay taxes on it again? Or, we mentioned that tax laws will have to change at some point. Is that something that's kind of protected?
Yeah. Well, there actually was a big tax law change here just recently on retirement and IRAs. They raised the IRA limit from 70.5 to 72 for required minimum distributions. But then they also took away a feature that was really important, and that was inherited IRAs. You could take distributions over your lifetime. Now you have to take that distribution within 10 years. It's going to force up income earlier on and push people up into a higher tax bracket. So they can change the laws prospectively moving forward. But once the money's in the Roth, I think they're going to find it very difficult to come back and then say that they're going to tax it, because they've said you put it in there after tax. We're never going to tax it again. It's going to be very difficult for them to come back and say that they're going to tax it. I suspect they could change the law and prohibit you from being able to make backdoor Roth contributions or to make any Roth contributions in the future. So that's another reason why people should focus on that now. Get as much in there as possible at the lowest tax rate possible. I don't think it makes sense stuffing a lot of money into a Roth account if you're already in the higher tax brackets. But at an individual or a family level, you'd want to look at that and see if that makes sense for you.
Yeah, unless you're always going to be in the highest tax bracket and you believe that in 2026 it's going to go up even higher.
Then absolutely. Then it would make sense.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's probably it all depends on your situation, right? Because everybody's different. Yeah. Everybody has different income levels and requirements and things like that.
Well, and that's why when we do these analyses, we're looking at over the next 20 to 40 years. We're actually forecasting out what people are going to pay in taxes over the next 20 to 40 years.
Is it heartbreaking to some people when they see that number?
Yeah, it is pretty daunting. And I'll tell you, the big thing that's daunting is when people start to look at converting IRA to Roth IRA when they're at retirement or going into retirement. There's a time period where it might make sense to actually do conversions and to pull that into income and pay tax on it, but push it from a regular IRA or regular 401k into a Roth IRA. And the hard part is writing the check to the federal government, right? Because it's pre-tax. A lot of people look at their 401k plan and think, I have $1 million in my 401k plan, I should be fine. You don't really have $1 million in your 401k plan. You've got about 2/3 of that, right?
About 600,000. So you lose about 400,000 right off the bat.
To federal and state tax. So after tax, you really only have 600,000, not $1 million. So you're going to have to write the check. It's just a matter of when do you write the check? And for how much do you write the check for? Can we minimize that by pulling that forward now if your income's in a lower bracket? So it's like I said, you want to play that tax rate arbitrage type game and to have an advisor to help you do that. Wow.
So shifting gears just a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about, starting your own business, being an entrepreneur, and what you mentioned you got the decision or that reason because you wanted the flexibility and some of the freedom and some of the things that we all kind of like. But one of the things I thought was interesting when I was digging through your site and your bio is that, you've used technology a little bit to do some of this stuff, and you have employees in different states that work remotely. And how do you guys manage that, and what kind of gave you the mindset and the idea of going paperless and being a more cutting edge technology financial company?
Yeah, well, before I started my business, I actually worked with a large Big Four accounting firm, and I was a certified information systems auditor. So I got familiar with technology. We did information systems and business process audits. And so when I started my firm, that was kind of my first thing. Was I wanted an effective, efficient business process, and it was only me. So it really had to be efficient and effective. And technology was the way, you could deliver that. And that was, back, I started my business in 2002. So we've just tried to keep up with technology and the changes. Zoom is one of our, kind of our big tools that we use. Now we've got clients in 25 states, and we've got staff in 5 states, and 6 or 7 different locations, even within different states. But that efficiency, that effectiveness is important. People are implementing a client relationship management software. We use a tool that's a CRM, but also manages workflow. And we can actually program that workflow ourselves, so we can customize our own workflows and make sure that we're not dropping anything through the cracks. And that's one of the points that I tell folks about is, if you're going to work with an advisor or another professional, make sure that they're working efficiently and effectively, that they've got good workflow to make sure none of these technical things drop through the cracks. Have you ever read Atul Gawande's book, The Checklist Manifesto?
No, but someone else recommended that on the show not too long ago. I want to put that on my to-do list.
It's a great book, but it talks a lot about, professionals and experts in any industry. As you get into areas that are more complex, if you're not using a checklist, stuff is just going to naturally drop through the cracks, because your brain can't handle all this task switching that goes on, right? It's not multitasking, it's task switching. And so having a checklist, like a pilot in the airplane, and making sure all the systems are working properly, that nothing falls through the cracks. You want a professional that uses business processes that are designed that way.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I use checklists all the time. And when we use at work, we have Jira and Trello and all kinds of different tools, that project management tools that do checklists. And my wife is a project manager, so our household is ran by checklists as well.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and it's very important, especially when you get into these complex areas of tax, financial, and investment strategy.
Yeah, well, I think it's really cool that you guys are using Zoom. I know we're actually using that to record this conversation as well. I think it's a great tool, and our company uses Zoom for our Zoom rooms and conference room meetings, which is an awesome technology that allows you to do lots of really cool things. And it's kind of opened up the world and made it to where you don't have to be at the office or living in a certain place to work for that place. Yeah,
I think Rebecca Stroud, she's basically our director of client service and operations. She lives in St. Louis, and she works from her home there. And our connection with VPN back to the office here, as well as Zoom, allows her to connect here with our clients, with other team members. These are the important aspects of that kind of decentralized approach. When you think about like the mainframe environment versus client server environments and things like that, that decentralization allows you to become more efficient and effective in managing resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, when you're more efficient, more effective, then you're going to have a better bottom line, and at the end of the day,
and a better client experience, right?
Absolutely. I think video conferencing is just so. I don't know how we lived with that before. Like having a phone conversation sometimes is a little daunting as people drift off. You got 10 people on the call. How do you know who's But being able to do a video conference where you see everybody and you get that body language that kind of comes into it. You're not just hearing their voice. You're not just reading some text, but you're getting more of the picture of what's going on in the conversation.
Yeah, I started using video conferencing, I think it was in 2003. And it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And very few people actually used it. It was crazy. But, I can't imagine doing my work today without it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, this has been a great conversation. Do you have any last pieces of advice or tips that you want to give anybody? And also be sure to tell them where they can pick up your book.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, you can get to my website. It's www.waynebtitus3.com. So that's Wayne B. Titus, Titus 3, the number 3.com. My book, you can purchase it on Apple Books or Amazon. And, I'm glad to have had this conversation with you, John. It's most important for me, I think, to help educate, people, individuals, as well as entrepreneurs. These concepts are applicable to both, to understand what are the advisors and the types of advisors that are out there, to look for somebody that's interpretive and that integrates these things holistically on a fee only basis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because, I think the advice in your book was really helpful, and it was easy to read, easy to understand. And again, I really appreciate it. I've never had anybody on to talk about finances before, so I think it's about time. And hopefully it's helpful to everybody that's listening.
Well, I'm happy that I could be the one to do it, John. And like I said, we work in 25 states, and we'd love to add a number of states to that. So if your listeners are interested, we're available for them.
Yep. And I'm going to link you guys up on the show notes. People can get that at geekleader.com, as well as a link to the book, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Financial Wellbeing. Thanks again for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
Hey, John, it was my pleasure.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and don't forget that you can get your private internet access and secure your web browsing today for only $3.33 a month at geekleader.com/VPN.